Welcome to Dice and Mind, a podcast hosted by Brad Brown and Jason Kaufman to explore the intersection of life, games, science, music, philosophy, and creativity through interviews with leading creatives. All are welcome in this space.
So we've talked a bit about the fact that after what was an unnecessarily long hiatus from work, I started work in February,
Mm-hmm.
and it was through a connection I had
Yeah.
at a job that I had now approaching that I took now approaching 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and was there for a couple of years before the company got sold and for its IP, and we all were kind of let go. Steve, who worked in one group and I worked in another, reached out to me, said there was a position open that kind of matched my skill set. Ironically, now we work together again, but
Yeah.
we work in different departments than we did
Mm-hmm.
at the previous job. Well, we didn't know it at the time, but our interests in RPGs and sci-fi and fantasy and all that overlap. But because at our old job, the departments, it was a little bit bigger organization. So our time together was spent really in almost all circumstances in professional situations and meetings and things like that. We never really got a chance to sync up and do much personal discussion or anything like that. Here, because it's a smaller organization, we did. So now he's a listener of the podcast. As of the time we're recording this, he's been listening to it serially from episode 1. You know,
Yeah, that's really cool.
that's really cool, and he is a glutton for punishment. But one of the things I found out was his wife and our guest tonight did a podcast for a while, and he showed me some video and some pictures of a setup he did for one of his RPG adventures, and for one of his very good friends, and his very good friend's wife is our guest tonight,
Mm-hmm.
who it turns out is a phenomenal writer, podcasting on her own. It was just, I mean,
I mean, you'll all hear it. It turned into just a
yeah,
really fun, really
a
great
really interesting
discussion.
interview. Yeah, with talking with Greta about this. And so once he heard our podcast and he knew what her background and her thing is, he said, you should just make a connection with her. He didn't, and said, since you know, we're all RPG and sci-fi and fantasy fans. And then once I heard that, she's a writer, we have to hear about her creative process.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and fortunately, she was willing to get into it. And it's just all really, certainly to us, really interesting.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating, and she really got into the weeds on that stuff, which we really appreciated her doing. So,
Absolutely. Greta K. Kelly is probably not a witch, death or otherwise, but she can still be summoned with offerings of too beautiful to use journals and Butterfingers candy. She currently lives in Wisconsin with her husband EJ, daughters Lorelei and Nadia, who are doing their level best to take over the world. The Warrior Witch duology, consisting of The Frozen Crown and its sequel, The Seventh Queen, are both out now. Greta's third novel, The Queen of Days, a standalone novel, adult fantasy, is also out now.
Greta, thanks for joining tonight. Let's talk writing.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So, how did you, if you don't mind, like the broadest and most generic question ever, sorry to be the boring guy, but how did you kind of get started, and what got kind of your creative juices going in terms of writing?
Gosh, oh well, like way back in, if you want to start way back in the beginning,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a country kid growing up in like the far western part of, no, I don't know if my listeners will know what this is, Waukesha County, the
Oh,
middle of
sure.
Wisconsin.
Brad's
And
from
you know,
Oconomowoc.
okay, yeah. So I
Yeah.
was like Genesee Depot. There was nothing there
Oh,
30
we
years
well,
ago.
cheers to far western Waukesha County. There
Yeah,
we go.
yeah. So really it was just you had to entertain yourself, and entertaining myself was just telling stories to my stuffed animals and my imaginary friends because I was the youngest of four and my older siblings
Oh.
wanted nothing to do with me.
Oh.
Typical older siblings, it's fine. um but the writing part didn't really come in until later. I had a really great group of friends in high school, and we were all really creative, but in different ways.
Mhm.
So there was like another writer in the group. There was a really good visual artist. There was a seamstress in the group. And we would just get together and we would like just do our creative thing and then talk for 30 minutes and then go do our thing and then come back and talk. And it just ignited that idea of creativity could be not necessarily solitary. It is solitary in a lot of times, but it doesn't have to be.
Mhm.
And when you're pursuing a creative field, just having any kind of community around you is really invaluable. Of course, I was writing books all through, quote unquote, air quote books. At that
Yeah.
point, it was like horrible Dan Brown fan fiction. Dating myself here. But
Yeah, we're right there with you. Mhm.
Um, but I graduated high school right when like the market crashed in the early 2000s, and it was like, well, shit, I guess, like print media is dead. It was like on all of the headlines. I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to be pursuing journalism as a major.
Oh, yeah.
So I went off and got my business degree because that was the practical thing to do.
Yeah.
And I got my first like job at a local bank fresh out of college, and I was like, I freaking hate this so much. I cannot do this.
Yeah.
And so I remembered, oh yeah, I had this idea for a book that one time. Why don't I just like sit down on my breaks and start writing it? And that's what I did, just on my lunch breaks
Oh.
for probably about a year. Just the weird lady that didn't talk to anybody and was just scribbling in notebooks because I didn't have a laptop at the time. And that book eventually became The Frozen Crown, which is my first published book. It came out in 2021.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been a lifelong passion that's slowly become a career.
That's okay. So I'm curious because we really like getting into the mechanics of this stuff.
Mhm.
So excuse me. So how long were you at the bank?
That job I think only lasted like maybe a year
Okay.
tops.
And
Yeah.
so you wrote this over lunch and whatnot over about
Hmm.
a year.
Probably, I would say about a year, year and a half, because I
Okay.
really didn't know what I was doing at that
Yeah,
point.
right.
But
And
yeah,
then it was finally published in 21.
right.
Not
So
all
it
okay.
was, yeah.
Yes, so I'm curious. I mean, and obviously, no, no, but this is This is really interesting to us. Seriously, that
Hmm.
so obviously there, like the lead up, all the stuff with the publisher, the editing, that
Hmm.
takes time. But like, what happened between those? How did you go from writing that and then a considerable number of years later
Hmm.
getting it published? Like, how did you? How did you do that? How did you learn to navigate that? Because, you're with a major publishing house,
Hmm.
one of the big five or
Yeah.
six, depending on your reckoning.
Yeah.
And, right, and, and, I mean, they don't even take unsolicited stuff, right?
Hmm.
So going from, lunch hours to landing something like that is pretty cool. Like, what's the
Pretty
story
cool. That's
there?
huge. It's
Huge,
Yeah.
right?
yeah.
So there's like two parts to the story. There's the part where you're writing just as much as you want, you're writing the story of your dreams. But then once you have that written, you have to figure out how to edit it because obviously that first draft is a hot mess. I don't care who you are. Your first draft of your first book is always going to be an absolute disaster, and that's okay. Embrace it, embrace the suck. It's okay. But learning to edit it is a whole different process. And so I took lots of like online classes, and I met a great independent editor named Rebecca Heyman, who at that time she had her own editing shingle out. I think by the time this episode airs, it's probably will be announced in publishing circles that she's now with Entangled. She's taken over one of their
Cool.
like editing
Yeah.
imprints. So, but I learned from her. She edited the book for me that first time and just hoard a new one in the most loving way
Yep.
possible.
Yep.
But you need that.
Mhm.
You need to kind of develop that thick skin to know that these words that mean so much to you don't mean anything to anybody else unless you can convey all the things that you want to.
Mhm.
So that editing process probably took another year. And then
Wow.
after that, um, and granted, this is all just because I was learning at this point now in my career, everything goes a little bit faster, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Um, I knew that I wanted to be traditionally published uh, because indie publishing has come a long way since 20, yeah, this was probably about 2018, but it's still very much like running your own business. And I was just not that entrepreneurial at that point in time. So I was like, I
Right.
would like support. But
Yeah.
if you want to be traditionally published, you need to get an agent.
Yep.
And that involves a whole other skill set that you then have to acquire, namely learning how to write a query letter,
Hmm.
which is like distill your 300, 400 page book into 2 paragraphs tops and make it interesting enough that an agent who receives 300 of these emails a day will want to hear more from you. So it's hard.
Yeah.
A lot of authors, um, their first books die on in the query trenches.
Hmm.
And if there are any writers in the crowd and this has happened to you, please know that you are not alone. Like most of my now published author friends did not sell their first books. I felt really, really lucky that I was able to sell my first book. Um, those books aren't wasted. I know so many of those authors now that have been able to come back to those original books. And whenever you see an author who debuts one year and then has 2 more books come out in the following 2 years, those are probably older books that they put on the back burner and thought would
Right.
never see the light of day.
Yeah, that makes
So do
sense.
not lose hope.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing
That's
wasted.
great.
Yeah. So, but in 2018 is when I went to a writing conference in New York, which makes me sound very bougie, but I was terrified the whole time. But my husband made me go.
Yeah.
And I met an agent there and I pitched her on the book and she loved it. She asked to read the whole novel. And yeah, within a few months I had signed with her
That's really cool.
and then she sold it to Harper Voyager and
Yeah,
the rest is
amazing.
history. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's because I mean, I think like you said, there's so much more out there now in
Hmm.
terms of information, guidance, writers being willing to share. But it's
Hmm.
still, I think, really hard to find successful authors like you who are just transparently saying, here's what it was. And like you said, embrace the suck. I think you said that before,
Hmm.
maybe before we were recording, I don't know. But there's a lot of
No, she
embracing the
said
suck.
it before.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
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 And and
Something.
and I think to talk about that, that's really honest. I think that's really important for people,
Hmm.
whether it's writing or whatnot, who are trying to be creative and get their work or their voice out there, right? Because yeah, that's the perennial challenge. And it's getting harder, I think, right?
Hmm.
Not easier.
Oh, of course. Yeah, it's only getting more difficult. And it's always great that you have more books, people mean more readers are interested. What now we have like the shade of AI looming over the whole industry. And I think that's making a lot of people like clench. I'm like,
Yeah,
please
yeah.
no. Art is not supposed to be made by computers. Please let us keep our jobs. Oh yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
At least for the next 15 minutes, you can kind of tell when you read something that it's kind of
Yeah.
AI generated, or when you listen
Hmm.
to something with music, you can kind of still tell it's pseudo
Yeah.
AI generated. And I'm hoping, at least for the time being, we still are going to be able to differentiate.
Hmm.
Um, you know,
But but we won't,
I'm holding
right?
out hope. I'm
Yeah,
really holding out hope. I
Yeah.
know.
yeah.
Um, I find it fascinating. You were because I always ask like the goofy question, like what was your what was your writing ecosystem like. I got really
Ooh, no,
fascinated
no,
by
no.
this
Yeah.
when
Hmm.
um and it was a more recent thing, like within the past like 7-8 years, when I heard like George R. R. Martin talk about how he writes on an old XT PCXT with WordStar 2000, because I'm
Hmm.
old enough, I remember using that word processor, and that it was, I mean, yike. Um, but you wrote, I mean, you literally
Yeah.
as a writer started by
Wait, pen and paper?
writing.
Pen
Yeah,
and paper. Yeah.
she was full on analog, remember, because
I
she said
love
she
that.
was
Yeah.
doing that.
I don't do that anymore, but
No, well, I
No,
mean, no,
presumably
that's
not.
no,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I mean, it's very hard. You can, I mean, there's nothing wrong with like note taking or even,
Mhm.
or things like that, doing that, but that would be that's a very difficult medium when deep in the creation process now.
Yeah.
How, and you were doing this in the computer era, let's be honest. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
so how, you know, as the creativity was flowing and as you were writing, how is that?
Wait.
I don't even know what.
So I want to interrupt because you actually asked a question and then backed off of the question, but we're both interested.
Yeah.
Greta, your writing ecosystem,
Yeah.
like the
Well,
actual
that's what I was
tools, the
going at,
tech,
but I was
what do
focusing
you
on the pen
act?
and paper.
Oh, I just want, I'm going to start in the present. How do you
Mhm.
actually do it now? Like, what are you using? Hardware,
Yeah.
software? Like, what's your deal?
Yeah. I have a laptop now, so most of the time it is a laptop on Word,
Okay.
very
Yeah.
basic.
Okay.
But I really make an effort not to be precious about the ecosystem. You have some authors or some writers who set up these really beautiful offices, and I say this and I have a really beautiful office, but like they can only create in that space,
Oh,
or
okay.
they need the beautiful scented candle, or like they need all the conditions to be perfect. Life is not like that, at least not my life. I have two kids who are 4 and 5. I write when I can, so I have like notebooks everywhere, and sometimes I'm taking notes in my notebooks, or writing little scenes in notebooks and then transcribing them on my computer. I have done snippets on my phone at 2 in the morning while feeding a newborn because I was on a deadline. So like, however, like
Sweet.
don't have like the movie version of what a writer is supposed to look like and how they're supposed to work, like stop you from actually just putting words on the page.
So you don't live at a Starbucks?
No, sadly.
Not the digital nomad approach. But you hit it on the head. I mean, I think going back to what I said about like Martin, I think he destroyed that by talking about writing on an old beige device using a
Mhm.
30-year-old word processor, and you're still putting pen to paper
Yeah,
when you need to.
yeah,
It's very cool.
It's really about, it's
Love
really,
that.
the medium isn't so much as the result,
hmm
you know.
absolutely.
Um, you
And
know,
sometimes switching things up, just like silly things like switching to pen to paper if you're normally someone who types,
Yeah.
or leaving yourself a voice memo, is a
Oh
really good
yeah.
way to trick your brain into creativity when you're not feeling creative. Um, but the muse doesn't come to you, you have to go to the muse. So like whatever helps
Yeah.
you, reach the point where you feel like, oh, finally I'm inspired again. Like switch it up if you ever get into that writer's block sort of
Hmm.
mentality.
I want to bookmark talking about genre at some point, but
That's what's on my mind.
yeah, I wanted to bookmark that so we don't forget it. But I was going to ask also, from a timing perspective, when you're in writing mode,
Mhm.
and you know, now all three of us are dealing with two kids just at different age levels, so we know
Yep.
what it's like, corralling children. Um, how do when you're deep in writing mode, how much time are you putting in on a daily basis?
Oh
You know,
yeah. Or like word count. I mean, like what's good
yeah.
for you?
Yeah, I try not to worry about word count too much unless I'm in like a fast drafting kind of mode, and then I do keep track of word count
Hmm.
in an Excel file just because I'm stupidly competitive and I'm always trying to
Yeah.
like beat the previous day's work. But most days I wake up, I try to wake up before the kids, and they wake up god awfully
And
early.
how
So
how
I'm usually
how
awake by 5,
oh my God.
and then I
How
get
old are they?
4
You
and
said
5.
five, 4 and 5.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So I usually get an hour and a half in the morning, and then, get them up and ready for
Yeah.
school or daycare or at home, depending on what day it is. And then they usually have either a nap time or independent play throughout the day. I'm a stay-at-home mom at this point.
Hmm.
So my schedule very much depends on what they're doing. And
Hmm.
I'm really sad that they just gave up naps because I've lost so much
Oh,
time.
Oh,
it that's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the upside is that like they like each other, they'll play with each other, they're more independent now. So I can like sneak into my office and
Yeah.
do little 20-minute
If
writing sprints
if
here
it
and there.
if it helps, about a decade from now, they won't want to get up at all in the morning, so you'll have plenty of time.
And I'm thinking sweet, sweet vengeance is mine.
That's right.
yeah. Yeah, mine are about a decade. Mine are about a
Yeah.
decade ahead, and
Yeah.
now I'm at a point where I really don't see them. And while I don't miss having to corral and all of that like I did
Mhm.
younger, I wouldn't mind seeing them a little bit more,
Yeah.
you know. But
Sorry,
yeah,
we
I
got
was
off
just
track. Go
curious.
ahead.
I was just curious just from a timing perspective. Everyone's different.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I didn't say this. I am the non-writer of the group, really.
Oh, okay.
So it's I know you smirk, but I don't do it like you do. Like you both,
No, no, it's
I have a different type of job. I just don't spend that much time doing it.
neither of us are legit writers. I think it's clear to say
Well, you do
that's
more
why.
nonfiction type of
Yeah,
writing and
right.
research
Well, I
type of
mean,
writing
right.
and stuff like that.
Fair.
But
Okay.
I literally don't write, So so I'm
It's the
always
guy
just
with the chapter
fascinated.
coming up, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just am fascinated. I'm just fascinated by all of this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of, obviously
Yep.
the story, the Frozen Crown, the story obviously flowed from you.
Hmm.
Um, you know, you love working in that genre. Um, and you've continued in that genre.
Hmm.
What's kind of drawn you into that realm and kept you in that realm?
Yeah.
Gosh, I think like most people of my age group, Harry Potter. Say what you will now about the author
There's
of
still
Harry
great.
Potter.
There's still great books. It's still a great story.
Yeah, it drew so many people in my generation into reading in general.
Yeah.
But for me, fantasy. And then right on the heels of that, the Lord of the Rings movies, the original trilogy came out. And my dad is a huge Lord of the Rings
Oh,
fan.
cool.
And so he would not let any of us kids watch the movies until we had read all four books. And so
Oh,
that was kind of like, oh, okay, so here's what like adult fantasy looks like, and this is what I could do with it. And I basically never looked back. So between
nice.
that and playing D&D and tabletop role-playing games, I was a goner.
Oh,
She
interesting.
opened the door.
Yes, she
Yep.
did. Okay, so say more about that, Greta.
Yeah,
What did you or do you play?
I am gonna play. I do currently still play with your coworker Steve. He's our
Mm.
DM and has been for probably 10 years now.
Wow.
I play an arcane trickster, tiefling, of course, and she's my favorite character. She's a pure chaos gremlin, and I love her dearly.
And you all, I mean, when you all game, I've seen Steve and I do actually. Steve listens to these.
Mhm.
Um, and we do work. We literally do work a lot. We just take very rare, because we don't normally lunch. We'll take very rare breaks, and he'll pull up, like, we'll talk a little bit about
Yeah.
something on an episode, or we'll talk about what you and his wife would do, which we will get to at
Mhm.
the end, because I do want to bring it up. Because you actually have a podcast that we want to talk about.
Mhm.
But he'll bring up some of the stuff that you all do from a role playing perspective, which is like next level. I mean, you guys
Ooh.
dress up,
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
Oh, really?
Jason, I have purposefully,
Yeah, I'm like totally in the dark on this, which is not
yeah,
the norm.
Jason doesn't. I didn't tell him a lot about this because I partially, not because I wanted to be mean, but I kind of like watching some of his reactions with some of this stuff, because I call it the
Normally, I
cough. I call
find
it the
Brad droll and boring, but this is
Yeah,
much better.
yeah. I like the Kaufman grin, to see the Kaufman grin
Right.
sometimes.
Great.
So he doesn't know about some of this, and he has shown me, like, even some of like the intros he does with the movies when you
Yeah.
guys get together.
But
Oh
you guys
yeah.
have been playing for like a decade?
We have, and not
That's
all the same game.
no,
People
no.
come and go, but
Yeah, it's
yeah,
incredible.
between D&D and we also play 7C. Rarely we can all get the group together to play 7C, but we love
Mm.
it. And he Steve is such a great DM, and he's like created 80s themed games and 30s themed games
We
and like
both played the 80s
all
theme
of
game.
it.
It's maybe
Yeah.
better to move on. Yeah.
But
So,
yeah, so we dress up as much as we can.
wow, I have like three different things going on in my head right now. Keep going. I'm going to come back with a question or two.
um, yeah, and you've even, like, more recently done like a Star Wars theme game, but
Hmm.
you didn't use, um from my understanding, he didn't use any of the existing Star Wars
Right.
games. It
Oh,
was
what'd you do?
literally a D20 system that was modified for Star Wars.
Hmm.
So it was
That makes
able,
sense.
so yeah, because I think you all have been used to using kind of the same type of dice mechanic in the same system. So it was really kind of
Hmm.
just modified and utilized. And I mean, honestly, I mean, from what I saw from some of the videos and all that, the the costuming was
Yeah. And he like completely renovated his basement. Like his basement was your like an average basement.
Yeah.
And between Steve and one of his sons and our friend Dan and my older brother Carl also plays with us occasionally. They all like I don't know how many months they spent like building the Millennium Falcon out in his basement. And no one like we knew something was happening. We Ed and I didn't know what it was. And my husband is a huge Star Wars fan. And so this was kind of Steve's surprise for Ed. And so it was, I think, 3 years ago now. So we've been playing one a year. We're trying to complete the trilogy. So
So
this
like
year we're hoping to complete the
like
trilogy.
the first time he walked down there, did he just look at you with a grin and say, "Chewie, we're
Yes.
home"?
Yeah. He's like, just kill me now. I
Oh my
can
God.
die happily.
from the videos, I think you went down first before Ed, right? So
Yeah.
you
Wow.
got to
So I
see
could
it
catch
before
his,
Ed got a chance to.
yeah.
That's really loud. Okay, but so I mean, obviously, like we especially me big into sci-fi, right? That's
Mhm.
always been my thing. When it
Yeah.
comes, it's pretty much. I mean, sadly but truly, it's pretty much the only fiction I read. I mean, I have some fantasy. Don't get me wrong.
Hmm.
Like Lord of the Rings, like there's just nothing that compares to the depth and beauty of that. But but you're all into that. But yet you
Hmm.
write exclusively in the fantasy
Hmm.
genre, right? But
Yeah.
no internal issue there, right? I mean, you enjoy both sides of that coin, or?
I do. I definitely read more fantasy. But this year I joined. I'm one of the co-hosts of SFF Addicts podcast now,
Oh
which stands
yeah,
for science fiction and fantasy.
very
So
cool.
I have been broadening my horizons and reading a lot more sci-fi recently, and it's been great. And we've gotten to interview some really amazing sci-fi authors. We just got John Scalzi. We interviewed him. J.S. Duis actually is another Wisconsinite. So if you haven't heard of any of her books, you should definitely check them out. They're
Mm.
Okay,
stellar. They're great.
really.
I'm keeping my hands off the keyboard right now, Jason. I'm
Brad
I'm
Brad has
to-
a problem. Brad has bought many things on Amazon mid episode. I kid you
Yeah.
not.
yeah,
Well,
I have
I
to be
mean,
careful.
Jenny had the best hook for her book. I think the first one was The Last Watch, and it was basically, oh crap, The Night's Watch. Is that what it was in Game of Thrones? The Night's Watch in
I don't know.
space.
Okay.
Oh, oh.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
I had trouble. I had trouble not I had trouble with Game of Thrones at first, not for any
Hmm.
like ethical reasons. It was just like
Yeah.
hyper intense. And
Yeah.
I'm the type of person where like if work was intense, I couldn't come home and watch intense television. I
Yeah.
needed
Yeah.
something light.
I'm the same way
Um,
sometimes too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially with Grimdark, because you just know that no one's going to be happy. And I
yeah,
like to think that, oh, maybe this one person will get out alive or, materially unharmed.
yeah. Martin wasn't helping with
No.
that. But um I've seen enough pieces over time with Night's Watch and Jon Snow and
Hmm.
those parts of Game of Thrones and I've read some of the books
Hmm.
um, because I've just been fascinated by him as an author. Just
Yeah.
him as an author and what his creative process and everything like that, and the fact that those tomes are just insanely huge. Um, that
I
um,
just don't know how he doesn't plot. Like
yeah,
everyone writes differently, but how it boggles my mind.
This is
I'm always someone who has to plot out my book, so I don't know how
okay.
he
So this is good because we're curious about this. It's because this is what turns me off from ever considering trying to write legit fiction
Mhm.
plot. I know I'm dead serious. Like
Yeah.
nonfiction, like I can outline like crazy, like the organizing that comes
Hmm.
naturally to me.
and
But
Jason
the
GMs for us for Star Trek, so
Okay.
well, yeah,
you
I
do
oh,
plot in a
but
way,
well,
but
that's I'm not very good at it, the GMing, and B, that's
don't sell
like,
yourself short.
but
But
it's true. But that's really brief too, right? I'm talking about like a
yeah,
novel, like the notion of having to plot out
Mm.
that entire story, that truly just blows my mind. I don't
Yeah,
know how you and others do that start to finish. I mean, I'm sure that it evolves, but still,
for sure.
I mean,
Yeah, and like with plotting, I was honestly I was the same way for a long time. I thought, oh, that's not like the romantic like idea of what a writer is supposed to do. You're just supposed to like sit down and write the thing and let
yeah.
inspiration come. And I wrote an entire Gordian knot of a disaster book that will never see the light of day that way. And so like when I was writing the Frozen Crown, I was like, well, I have to do something different. So I started researching plot. And you can go like as deep in the weeds as you want to
Yeah.
with story structure and with outlining your scenes before you start writing. I have a friend, MJ Kuhn, who writes amazing books. She calls them about axes and assholes. So Among Thieves, check that out if you want to. But she will Excel spreadsheet our outlines, and I'm not quite at that level yet.
Yeah, yeah.
But to each their own. I tend to use it's the 7 point plot structure. I think Dan Wells, an author called Dan Wells, is the one who popularized it. And it's really just like seven plot points that you like, seven beats that you should hit. And it's very
Okay.
like, and it's very familiar. Like anyone who's ever read a 3 act story will kind of understand, like, oh, okay, there's the inciting incident, Harry Potter getting his Hogwarts letter. There's like the midpoint climax. There's the dark night of the soul, usually when the mentor dies, or in a romance, it's when the couple breaks up. And then there's like the battle scene, the climax. It's like just 7 points.
Mhm.
So if that's all you do, you have your 7 points in your head, then you just kind of write towards those. And for me, I think the most liberating thing about that is that at some point I realized, oh, I'm not chained to this outline. I can veer away from it if I need to,
Right.
but the outline is there in case you get lost in the weeds. You can kind of like
Right.
work your way back to it. So yeah, just think of it more as like a guidepost rather than a thing that you have no choice but to follow.
Yeah, neat.
I would think from a process perspective, it kind of it like you said, it's like it's you're on a nature trail. It gives you guides to walk the path. You
Mhm.
can still walk away from it,
Yeah.
but you know where to step back to so you don't end up
Yeah.
way off in
Yeah,
the
I can find
weeds.
that thread. Yeah.
Mhm.
You
And
know,
I think it also like you have to know how your brain works. Like I love a checklist. Like give me a checklist any day and my brain is happy just marking shit off of that.
Yep.
mhm.
So like with my third book, I wrote that during they don't do it anymore, but they used to do National Novel Writing Month or NaNoWriMo in
Hmm.
November, where a bunch of crazy people got together and tried to write 50,000 words just in the month of November. And that's how I wrote the first draft of my third book,
Oh
The
my
Queen of
God.
Days. And I
fifty
never would
thousand
have
words in a
50,000
shortened month
words.
with a holiday.
Yes, yes.
Oh
But I did
goodness.
it because I love a checklist.
Hmm.
Well, you had me when you said was it she tried to merge Excel and writing together. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
because I'm
No, no, I'm with
Yep.
you. No, no, I'm with
Yeah.
that. Yes. Yes. I that makes sense. So do you tend to work on one novel at a time, or are you actively writing more than one major project?
Um, and ideally, I prefer to work on one novel at a time, but usually how it's been shaking out is all like in the morning, I'll be just drafting something new, and then the
Yep.
afternoons, I might be editing something.
Oh, different one, right?
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I try not to like draft two projects at the same time because I think that
Right.
would make my brain explode.
Yeah.
But the act of writing and the act of editing use different parts of the brain, I think.
Hmm.
So it's different enough that I can get away with it.
with your creativity. Have you ever thought, with gaming and everything like that, now obviously there's a time component to this,
Mhm.
but you know, like leading games I know
Yeah, do
you're
you
like, yeah,
GM?
with what time I've got two
I
kids, I've
don't.
got,
Yeah. I
you know
want to. I have like this, don't know. I was going to say, don't tell Steve, but he's probably listening to this. I have like the seeds of like a game or two, like in the back of my head,
Mm.
there that I would maybe like to actually DM someday. I don't know why it makes me so nervous, the thought of DMing. I think because unlike writing, It's collaborative
Mhm.
storytelling, and all good DMs are such not only such good listeners, but they're really good at pivoting. So
Mhm.
I'm someone like, oh, I know in my books, I control everything. I know what's
Right.
going to happen. I might have played with these gremlins for 10 years, but I don't know what they're going to say next. I can't anticipate
Yep.
that. So I think that's what's kept me from DMing so far, but I think someday I might GM again. We'll see.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is so Steve and I worked together 10 years ago, um, at a different company in
Mhm.
different positions, and just kept in touch very on the periphery, just because
Mhm.
different
Mhm.
lives, different jobs,
Mhm.
everything like that, and
Yep.
then connected for this role. He recruited me into this role, and then just I don't even know what prompted me to even mention the fact that we do this podcast, and then we
Mhm.
started talking about games, and then now as we're in meetings together, um in the role he has now, it's a creative role,
Mhm.
um but it's funny how you can see, and Jason and I, we talk about the idea of gaming in the professional arena, and
Mhm.
how that, and you've worked in the professional arena, you have a business degree, so you could, no doubt you can see this, how you can
Mhm.
use those skills um, in the professional
Yep.
world and
Absolutely.
have
Mhm.
them benefit. And I was even talking about this with him, must have been yesterday, no, it was actually today, um, and how I can actually, the idea of like gamifying it, situations when things come up, or
Mhm.
you know situations that could escalate into conflict, and how to step back from those. And he's very good now at de-escalating conflict.
Mhm.
But you can see the GM. You could almost I can watch. I can watch the DMI eyes, Steve. If you're, I know you're listening to this. I can see your GM eyes working when we're in
Just
meetings. You know,
hear the clink of a couple dice hitting the tabletop
yeah,
somewhere. Like,
yeah,
oh, all right.
yeah. Someone told me that I should get, one of the guys I used to work with in Tennessee said I should get like those large uh, D20s.
Mhm.
And if people come in for meetings, just say, okay, roll for initiative.
I was gonna say that is the proper way to start all meetings.
you know,
Roll for initiative.
you
Right.
know.
Oh
So
yeah.
I
Okay.
think I wonder if Steve has him in his office. I'll have to see. If he doesn't, then I might jump on that.
But on
Yeah.
this notion of GMing and playing just RPGs and tabletop stuff
Mhm.
is dressing up or not, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if Brad said this to you before, but like we're increasingly focusing on the notion of RPGs as literature,
Yeah.
right? Like just reading them for their own sake, right?
Mhm.
It can be an expensive proposition, but just picking these up and reading
Mm-hmm.
them and enjoying them and hopefully be like being fueled by that.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm curious, given how accomplished you are writing fantasy, like are there games in or out of fantasy, doesn't matter. Are there games that you have found over the years really kind of fuel that creative fire for you? Like things, are there games or specific books in any games that you just enjoy spending time with, even if you have no interest in playing them?
I think, yeah, I actually, I'm one of those people that really got into like Critical Role during the pandemic, one of
Yeah,
the many people that
yeah, yeah, right.
did.
Mm-hmm.
So I love D&D. I will probably never play like a game quite like anything that they produce, but just seeing that and watching other people play at that, I guess at that level
Yeah.
is so inspiring. And it's like, oh, dang, like that's what you can do with a really amazing um a group of players and a great DM. And I feel very fortunate because I do have a group that's amazing. And we do play like I think I said before, we also play 7th Sea, which is an older game that does not get as much love as I think it should, because it is so much fun. So if anyone like doesn't know about what 7th Sea is, it's a tabletop game, kind of like D&D. There's less, like you don't have to worry. It's more, I think it's like dice pool. Like you just roll like your pool of, I think it's D10s. Um, but it's very much ruled by the rule of cool. So it's like you can try it, it's probably a good chance that you'll get it because it's very much action oriented. So if you ever wanted to play, Inigo Montoya in Princess Bride, like play it in that game system because you will get all of those cool piratey hero Errol Flynn type moments in that game. Um,
Interesting.
yeah. And I think like from the perspective of a storyteller, like there's no better way to learn about characters and emotional arcs than by playing role-playing games. Um, it's what inspired my third book. I always say my third book is loosely based off of a game of 7th Sea we once played.
Oh,
It
that's
might have been
cool.
D&D. I can't remember at this point. It
Yeah.
was like we were trying to rob a bank. And everything went wrong. Like the moment we walked in, we got made. Like they knew exactly who we were. We couldn't find the safe or we couldn't find the vault. Once we got to the vault, we couldn't open the door, as one does in any role playing game. We like set fire to the place. The whole city guard was searching for us. It was just an absolute catastrophe. And we should have left the table so frustrated. And instead, I drove home so excited and like fire in my veins, thinking, how can I make this a book?
That's cool.
Yeah. So the rest is history. But yeah, more people need to be playing role playing games.
Yes, I strongly agree.
I think, not only just as a means of, I mean, obviously collaboration, camaraderie, like the
Mhm.
typical stuff you'd think. I think there's, like we've talked about that there's professional benefits from it. I've talked about using it in an environment just as a means of breaking the monotony and
Mhm.
teaching the team to solve issues of an unusual nature, but not using the tools and everything that they're used to using on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But like you said, I mean, you can get a rush from failure, but but that it's the old business adage, if you're going to fail, fail fast and move on. This is an opportunity to do that in a sandbox
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
learn how to fail fast as a team and
Mhm.
learn how to recover,
Yeah.
um, and do
And if
that.
and if you're doing it with friends, I mean, it's just honestly, it's just good for the soul to have
Yeah.
that
Yes.
kind of fun, to be able to explore and experiment with depth of meaning, but no real life consequence. Like
Right.
that's just good for people.
Yeah. And I think unlike video games, and I'm not a
Yeah.
video game person, so I'm biased here. You're kind of forced to go through the story. Like how many
Right.
people who play video games ignore the story and just trying to get to the
Hmm.
fight scene? Like
Hmm.
there's no doing that really in a
Right.
role-playing game. You're forced to sit with the consequences of your actions.
Hmm.
And I think empathy is a dying art, unfortunately, in this day and age,
Oh yeah.
especially among people who grew up just playing video games and not doing much of anything else. So, yeah, it's like there's all kinds of ways to learn from, nerdy ass role playing games.
And there's nothing wrong with. I know a lot of it they're trying to computerize now, but Jason and I are still fans. There's nothing wrong with going back to doing some pen and paper.
Yeah.
You
Oh
know,
yeah.
so I know as a considering I have a PDF library that's inordinately
But these
large of
this is
PDF
but
of games, but I still love having the palatable book.
right. Oh yeah, yeah. I
Mhm.
mean, but you'll pry the physical book from my cold dead hands, as Charlton
Yeah,
Heston said. But still, I think the tech, if it's in the service of all the rest of this,
Mhm.
then it's great. Like you and I, this was one of the rare times where I ordered an RPG book before you did. Like I had to be one of the first. Like as soon as it was announced, I was like, boom, pre-order done.
yeah.
Um, but like as is so often now, the PDF comes out of these books, and then it'll be months, can be 6, 8 months before the print comes out, and
Mhm.
so it's nice to have the option, right, of at least perusing a little bit while you save it. Yeah, it's just like virtual tabletop stuff, right? Which we
Yeah.
haven't gotten into yet, but it's probably inevitable at some point.
But we
Mhm.
play just because of the little group
Yeah,
that
all
we
Zoom
play
games.
with.
Yeah.
I mean, you're Minnesota, I'm here. One of the other guys that
Yep,
Dr.
South
Peterson that
Carolina,
plays. He's in
another,
South
Mhm.
yep. I
Carolina.
mean, this is, yeah. Oh, like
Yeah.
having this discussion right now, which is wonderful. Like, this is the only way this would work.
Right.
Yeah,
Right? Otherwise, we'd be in some Starbucks with our laptops, and that would be super cliche.
nothing wrong with that.
No, 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 no
So,
judgment. No.
hey, so not to digress from the writing, I want to also be cognizant of your time because you do have
Mm,
little ones at home. But you alluded to this before, and I know a little bit of this, obviously. You are also involved in some podcasting yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Talk to us about it.
yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, I first got into the notion. Steve's wife, Claudia, is a good friend of mine. And for a minute there at the beginning, campaign 3 of Critical Role, we had a YouTube channel called Knitters and Critters, and we talked just about like our love of Critical Role and D&D in general and all sorts of other like nerdy stuff. For us, campaign 3 was a little bit meh compared to the other ones, so we shuttered that. But now I am podcasting with MJ Kuhn, who's another fantasy author, as well as Adrian Gibson, and he is a science fiction,
Very cool.
like gritty noir
Hmm.
style of indie author. And so it's called SFF Addicts Podcast, and we do weekly to bi-weekly interviews with all sorts of authors, from Joanne Abercrombie to Fonda Lee to John Scalzi. And we also
Very
do
cool.
master classes. So if you
Oh,
ever want to
cool.
know anything about the nitty gritty of writing and publishing, we probably have a master class where some famous person you've heard of has dug down into the nitty
Well,
gritty.
just another rabbit hole we're about to fall down. Thank you.
See,
Good. Yep.
Yeah.
and so you and we'll have that information for the listeners.
Oh,
We'll have
yeah,
that in
Oh,
the
thank
show
absolutely.
you.
notes.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
and you add that, so that's now obviously on top of your writing and everything
Hmm.
else you have going on.
Yeah.
So good
Yeah, and
grief.
I like how you're just, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom now. Oh yeah, I mean, just like nothing going on. It's
Yeah, I know.
yeah,
It's not like a whole job in itself.
you're right, exactly. Exactly. I mean, there's the beating of the children, there's the making, no, just kidding. Yeah.
So without
Hmm.
going into any details,
Yep.
Mhm.
how many projects are on your plate at the moment?
Mm.
Right now, I've got one on submission, which means we're trying to sell it to a publisher currently.
Hmm.
I've got another one that I'm drafting, and then I very randomly had an idea for a thriller book, so I'm trying to outline that now.
Cool.
Wow,
So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah,
holy moly.
that's excellent. Yeah, thanks so much for spending so much time with us this evening.
Oh,
This is
this was
so
awesome.
interesting.
Thank you so much.
Really, really appreciate it. And for your candor.
Oh, of course. Yes, this was an absolute pleasure. I would love to talk to you guys
Yeah,
again.
yeah. And
Plan
when
on
you
it.
when the books come out, we'll have you, as projects
Hmm.
come out, we'll keep up with you and let us know, and we'll have you back on and we'll
Oh,
talk
that'd be
about them.
awesome. Thank you.
Greta, thanks so much for joining. We really appreciate it. We're going to have you back again. Have to talk about, I know,
Bookstores.
bookstore. Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially considering you come from the area. We have
Hmm.
stories about independent bookstores.
Yep.
Jason, you have stories of independent bookstores up in the cities. I know you visited them out in the Bay Area. You
Yep.
visited them out over in the
I think
UK
it's
and
fair to say
such. And
all three of us love independent bookstores.
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. But let's head over to the Loon Cafe. I'm going to ask you first. What's on your desk? What are in your ears? What's on your bookshelf?
Yeah, so what's in my ears as it were regarding what's in my on my desk and like what's from my pen. So after we spoke with Greta, I looked into the podcast FFF Addicts and
SFF addicts?
SFF Sci-Fi Fantasy Addicts.
I didn't hear
Yeah.
the S at the beginning.
Oh,
That's
so
why.
yeah, SFF Addicts. So, and I don't know how I didn't know about this before, or at least had not listened to it. So, Greta, thank you for setting me straight. So, since we chatted with Greta, which was not long ago as we record this, I've listened to a few episodes, and I've listened to a few of the episodes which they label master classes, the ones that get into the publishing business, but especially how to find a literary agent, how to write a query letter, things like yes, things like that. And so thank you for that because Greta and team, because those set of episodes that they recorded over the past several years, right? They're spread out over their really, really large, I mean, many hundreds of episodes. Those actually have been influencing my practice this past week as I move forward with some of my own projects. So that's what's been on my desk, as it were. How about you, Brad?
Oh goodness. I don't know. I can't top that. Yeah, from my perspective, I think I kind of had alluded to you outside of the podcast and all that, that um, I had fallen into looking into some high fantasy stuff um, because
Hmm.
I needed to switch gears in terms of some world building stuff as I had worked through um, my GURPS project. Um, and um, with one of our future guests, we're going to talk about some. We're going to be talking about some RPG products.
We are?
Um, we are, and so I don't want to give a whole lot away right now because it's very early. But um, you know what? I'll give a piece of it away because we could talk more about it as we
Yeah,
go along.
go.
But um, there is a game out there. I'm surprised. No, I'm not surprised because we have sat in we sit a lot in the sci-fi realm.
Hmm.
Um, we dabble in high fantasy
Yep.
um, with D&D. We did a little bit with Pathfinder, but
Yep.
first edition. More so with high fantasy, really when it comes to like Fantasy Age and all that.
I was just gonna say, yeah. Hmm.
That's where we've kind of gotten our fantasy our high fantasy fix
Yep.
with especially with first edition. We really haven't had time to play
We
second.
just have it. No.
We haven't had time to play anything, let
Also
alone
true.
second edition yet. But we
Yep.
just love the 3D6 system
Yep.
um, from Green Ronin. But I've always been fascinated by the retro clones. Sorry, I wasn't going to use that term because that's not the right term. Um,
Derogatory cough cough.
yeah, that's a mean way of that's not the right way of putting it. But systems that have used like the the original versions of gaming systems from like the 70s and 80s as ancestral um what's the best way to put it like inspiration
Yeah, well, yeah,
to
absolutely. Absolutely. You know,
that's the best way that
infused with it, informed by it.
yeah
Absolutely.
but go but they're different. um One of the companies that I came across is a company called Goodman Games. um I had heard of it a little bit, but because we've lived elsewhere, I hadn't really dug in. Um, but I started digging into it, and they publish a game called Dungeon Crawl Classics. The more I got into it, their core rule book, I think now it first of all it's immense. It's like 500 pages.
Yeah.
Second of all, it's 500 pages. If you want the paperback version of it, you can get the paperback version of the core rulebook, which is really the only thing you need other than dice to um, be a guide or game master or dungeon master, whatever you want to call it, and or a player in the game. You don't need a plethora of books. You just need that. But the paperback version is only like 29 bucks. So there is a very inexpensive entry point into playing in their system.
Right.
Um, and then along with that, it's written in a way. The term that always comes up that people talk about is that it's zany. It's written
Yeah,
in
you
a
said
zany
that.
way. It's a zany system. They write it in a way that is for folks that both can be new to gaming or folks who have good memories of playing in the 70s, 80s, like when I was a kid and got the red box original basic D&D like in 84, 85 as a kid.
Yeah.
Um, so more to come on that, but I've become a real fan, and that's I've been reading it, and there are lots of tables and things in the book, but I'm reading it like literature.
Yeah, there it is.
And it's fun. It's a fun read. And there's more about it, but we'll talk about that in future Loon Cafes.
That sounds good to me. So we're just gonna leave it there because man, we have so much coming up, and we're really pleased that like this week and in the coming weeks, coming couple months, really the summer as a whole, um, we're really able to bring you all, our dear listeners, a true diversity
You're
of you know,
I was just gonna say because we've kind of stacked our
yeah.
guest list because you have a lot going on. I have some things going
It
on.
just summers are ironically difficult
Summers are difficult, but this year, this is probably going to be one of our more diverse guest lists
in a
of our
long
few
time.
summers.
And I'm
Yeah.
really happy about that. I'm really happy we can bring all of you that. So, with that said, you all know the deal. Be well, stay well. We'll see you in a couple weeks.